Karen never expected that the quiet, humid evenings of rural Florida would become some of the most unsettling nights of her life. When she first arrived at the horse ranch, she imagined long days working with the animals, peaceful nights in the small house she shared with a few other young women, and the kind of isolation that felt refreshing rather than frightening. The ranch sat across the road from a sprawling state park, a dense patchwork of tangled brush, towering pines, and swampy lowlands where wildlife thrived. It was beautiful in the daylight, but at night, the darkness there took on a weight of its own, a kind of presence that made the girls shut their curtains tightly and avoid stepping outside after dusk. The strange activity didn't begin immediately. At first, it was the occasional odd noise outside, something rustling through the palmettos, the sound of rapid movement across the gravel, or a sudden thump against the side of the house that made the walls shudder. Karen assumed it was normal for rural Florida: raccoons, feral hogs, maybe even a black bear wandering close to the property lines. But what puzzled her was the timing. The noises happened late at night, almost always after everyone was asleep. And each time she jumped out of bed and flipped on the outside lights, the yard fell dead silent. Nothing stirred. No shadows fled across the pasture. Whatever had been there was gone. The other girls heard the noises too. Sometimes a loud stride across the porch boards, sometimes heavy breathing outside a window, sometimes footsteps moving with startling speed along the perimeter of the house. They whispered about it over coffee in the mornings, trading their experiences carefully, as if sharing them too boldly might make the situation feel more real. None of them mentioned it to the ranch foreman at first. He was a no-nonsense type who rarely entertained what he called nonsense country jitters. But the visits didn't stop. In fact, they grew more frequent. Karen's dogs, the two cocker spaniels who slept curled near her room, were the first ones to react with real fear. As soon as the noises started, their bodies stiffened, their ears perked, and they growled so low it vibrated the floorboards. Sometimes they refused to go outside at all when the activity was happening, even when Karen coaxed them. They were good ranch dogs, used to all manner of wildlife, yet whatever was out there inspired a level of alarm she'd never seen in them. One night, everything escalated. Karen woke to her spaniels exploding into furious barking, more panic than she had ever heard them. At first she thought a predator had gotten too close to the horse pens, but as she ran to the window overlooking the kennels outside, she froze. Something massive was moving in the yard. Not walking, striding, covering ground so quickly and fluidly that it seemed to disappear and reappear between the pools of moonlight. It wasn't shaped like any animal she knew. Tall, far taller than any person she'd met, with incredibly long legs and a surprisingly small upper body. Its proportions were all wrong. The height alone might have unsettled her, but it was the way it moved that lodged terror deep in her chest. Each step spanned an unnatural distance, yet the creature remained perfectly balanced, almost silent except for the occasional snap of branches underfoot. Then it happened, the moment that burned itself forever into Karen's memory. One of her outdoor dog cages sat near the corner of the house, a sturdy metal structure used when the girls needed to keep the dogs secured briefly. As the creature swept across the yard, it slammed directly into the side of that cage with a jarring metallic clang. The impact rattled the bars, startling the cocker spaniels into a frenzy. Karen stood at the window, eyes wide, her breath caught in her throat. She couldn't make out its face, just the towering outline, dark and powerful, framed for a split second against the night sky. Instinct screamed at her to turn on the lights. So she did. The floodlights illuminated the yard instantly. But the creature had vanished. No fading footsteps, no blur of motion, no lingering shadow disappearing into the brush. It was simply gone. Karen's hands trembled as she backed away from the window. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, she checked the cage. The metal was bent, subtly, but unmistakably. Whatever collided with it had real mass. The other girls had heard everything. One of them admitted she'd seen something tall move across the porch a week earlier but had convinced herself she imagined it. Another confessed she often felt watched when she walked near the tree line, as though something kept pace with her just out of sight. They all described a growing sense that the nighttime visitor wasn't merely passing through, it was observing them, studying the house, maybe even waiting for something. Finally, gathering what courage they had, they approached the ranch foreman. He laughed, said they were spooking themselves, imagining things because the ranch was isolated. He dismissed every concern with a wave of his hand. No animal on the property had been harmed, so in his mind, there was no threat. When Karen mentioned the bent dog cage, he shrugged it off as old equipment warping in the humidity. The girls left the conversation feeling unheard and more alone than ever. And the activity didn't stop. It became predictable. Almost monthly. Always when the weather shifted, always near the same time of night, and always originating from the direction of the state park. After each visit, the dogs refused to go near the area for days. Even the horses acted uneasy, bunching together and staring toward the brush as if tracking something invisible. The fear eventually became too much. One by one, the girls moved off the property, and Karen followed soon after. She loved the animals, loved the open Florida sky, but there was no peace left for her there. Whatever had been watching the house wasn't simply passing wildlife. She knew it. The others knew it. They never figured out what it wanted, why it came so regularly, or why it seemed drawn specifically to their home. To this day, Karen can still picture the long-legged creature crossing the yard, its silhouette stretching unnaturally across the ground, the sound of it slamming into the dog cage, and the instant, impossible disappearance when the lights came on. She's spoken about it only rarely, but the memory remains vivid and unchanged. Some people call it Bigfoot. Others think the Florida swamps hide something stranger, a species adapted to the deep wilderness, rarely seen, incredibly fast, and intelligent enough to avoid human contact. Karen doesn't claim to know exactly what she saw. She only knows that the nights at the ranch were real, the fear was real, and the presence of that tall, dark shape still shadows her thoughts whenever she remembers the stillness of the Florida nights and the feeling of unseen eyes watching from the tree line.